Change efforts fail quietly all the time. Not because they're wrong, but because they're buried under noise. We focus on the noises instead of on the real signal. And then when we don't see the outcomes we need, the assumption is that the change has failed. But what if we were focusing on the wrong things? In today's episode, we're moving into the A in Change Shaper, advocating for what is really important. Because advocacy is how clarity survives. Welcome to Thoughts on Change, the podcast about the messy, political, emotional, deeply human side of leading change. I'm Kelly, and I believe anyone can implement lean tools until they actually have to get people to use them. Around here, we talk about how to move culture, how to build credibility, and how to influence without bulldozing. Basically, how to herd humans without losing your mind. So what is advocacy? Merriam-Webster defines advocacy as the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal. I think of advocacy for change leaders like you more as being a voice for what matters when competing voices are pulling attention elsewhere. Advocacy is about alignment and clarity, not persuasion. It's about building understanding and visibility to what is happening and how that connects to priorities. Advocacy for us is asking, what problem do we need to solve right now? Not what problem do we see or want to solve? And this can be really difficult. There are always so many things that could be improved. And as CI people, it is so easy for us to see the problems and opportunities all around us. We see problems everywhere. We are a hammer, and so all we see are nails, nails, nails. One of my favorite images that depicts this is a golf green covered in leaves. And you see a golfer crouched down near his ball, looking across the green at the hole, trying to plot the best path to putt. Looking at that, what do you immediately want to do? Yes, remove all the leaves, all of them. But here is the real question. What do you need to do? All we need to do is remove the leaves on your way to the hole. And here's the real challenge, because we see there is a problem or a better way, but that doesn't mean we need to solve it right now. Instead, it is all about what problem do we need to solve to meet our current goal. This means we need to have a really good grasp of that larger objective and the goals for the organization. And then we need to make connections from those to the specific problems we see and the improvements that need to be made. Now, making these connections is where we can help cut through all of the noise and get to what is really important. This is where we help senior leaders see what specific actions need to take place to really shift the business outcomes. We need to connect strategy to the frontline problems and then frontline problems to the strategic initiative they impact. Because when an organization shares a strategy, it is generally in terms like become a 20% EBITDA company. And now, not many people below the most senior leaders and finance understand what it really takes in daily production terms to get to a goal like this. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to figure out what levers to pull to affect that larger outcome, in this case, EBITDA. And then what levers to pull to affect those levers until you get down to the things that the site, a cell, and production people experience. So here's an example from a site I just came from with a strategy session, and they want to become a 20% EBITDA site. One of the levers that affects that we're looking at is labor. And we're looking at how many people they need to produce their volume. They have a lot of machines, a lot of molding machines, so they have set a strategic goal to have one person operate several machines. Now, right, that's a little easier to digest for a person on a production floor, and they can share that, but it still won't connect with what does that mean that I have to do on the line, or what problems do I need to solve every day. Instead, what you'll probably get as a reaction from a frontline person is, well, we need more people because we can't make what we need to without what we have. And you're just going to be asking us to go faster and work harder. Does that sound familiar to anybody? And here is where you come in, my CI warriors. This is where you need to advocate. You need to help connect the dots from that strategy of one person operating several machines down to the pain the operator is feeling and the problems they are currently experiencing. And then take those problems and connect them back up to your senior leaders so they know what exactly they have to do in order to achieve that goal. So how do you actually do this? There's a series of questions that I like to ask to help me in a case like this. So let's go through those. Question 1, what are the conditions that need to exist for us to operate with one person for several machines? Okay. Question 2, what would have to be true for us to operate with one person for several machines? So you can see those two questions are very similar, but just framed a little bit differently depending on how your leaders listen and hear and what they're focusing on. All right, now, third question, what currently prevents us from being able to operate with one person for several machines? Now, this last one should definitely get you some answers because you notice the first two are more thinking, what new reality do we need to have? What new condition has to exist? Where that third question is, tell me your problems. Tell me the things that are in our way, which we are much better at answering. And so in my example, I asked that last question and I got a whole laundry list of problems. Then it's my job to filter through these to make connections to the problems the operators feel, and then corroborate those with real data, because data does talk. Now, this does work both ways. When people on the front lines have problems, we also have to try to make connections between the problems they experience and talk about the higher level strategic initiatives of the organization. And now there will be cases where a problem on the front line is not the most important thing according to the business strategy. And it takes real courage to admit that and to say to a frontline operator that we cannot solve that problem right now. And you can use the business strategy to help with the conversation. And don't forget, you're not saying no. You're saying not right now. And by being clear with those priorities, you are actually helping the organization actually get things done and fix problems. It definitely feels bad short term, but in the longer term, it will mean more improvement and better results through more focused effort. Because remember, if everything is important, then nothing is. Okay, so back to connecting problems upward to your senior leaders. To do this, you just work the levers we talked about earlier in reverse. So instead of taking that larger goal and saying what levers impact that and down, you would say this problem impacts this lever, which in turn impacts this, which in turn impacts something large like our EBITDA or whatever big strategic goal the organization has. And here is a really important thing about connecting problems upward to leaders. The connection needs to be in the language of the people who need to solve the problems or to hear that this is a problem to make that decision. Of course, this is true downward to the floor as well, right? It has to be in the language that they will understand. But in my experience, that's not generally where CI folks have problems, right? We have problems connecting upward to senior leaders and convincing senior leaders that this is the right response or that this is the problem we need to solve. And the problem here is generally that we are presenting in CI speak, right? And your leaders are listening in value speak. They want to hear things like, if we don't do X, or if we do X, it will save Y dollars to our bottom line. If we change A, it will produce more product per person and improve our labor efficiency and spend. So, to help you translate your problem into value speak, I've made a quick reference sheet that connects most of the basic problems I see into value speak terms. Now, this is by no means a comprehensive list, and it might not have your specific problem on it, but it will give you a place to start and a way to think about if you're struggling. Now, if even after that you're still struggling with how to connect a problem that you are seeing with value speak in your senior leaders, try connecting with a person in finance who can help you because they are really excellent at this kind of talk. In the organization I work for, I try very hard to make very good friends with my finance partners because they're the ones who are the most fluent in value speak and can help translate the best. And that translation to value speak is another way to help you and others see if the problem that you've identified really needs to be solved right now, or if it needs to be left alone so that people can focus on other more important problems that will really move the needle. And now, of course, there are problems that don't connect to business strategies and initiatives and are harder to connect to financial numbers. And so then it's about connecting in a way that those leaders will still understand. So even if it's not a financial, what is the impact if we do nothing to our labor turnover, and connecting it to people are going to leave, which means we'll have to train more people, which means our delivery will suffer and our quality will suffer. So the layers between some of those kinds of problems that don't have a direct, tangible financial element can still be traced back to that financial side, but more from a risk perspective. So think about those in the context of, if we do nothing, what could the impact be? All right, one final note about advocating for what really matters. You will not always be successful. I know, but it's true. Sometimes you will make the exact right connections from a strategy or business initiative down to the frontline problem. You will have translated that perfectly from CI speak to value speak, and the senior leaders will still say, no, we aren't doing that. And here is something that is probably counter to what you have heard before. That's okay. In the end, other people have choice, and their choice is theirs. If they do choose counter to what you recommend, that is okay. You can disagree, and please do if you really believe in something. But once the decision is made and progress is chosen to move forward, your job is to now help the decision be as successful as possible. And this is that final and sometimes most difficult part of advocating. Because if you continue to talk about how you don't support the decision, you're no longer helping, right? You are poisoning. So as you go back out into your business, I want you to reflect on how you are currently advocating for what really matters. So ask yourself, what truly matters in the change I'm leading right now? Have I clearly named why this change matters in the language of who you're working with? And what does the organization need me to help them solve right now? And then what can I say not right now to, so that I can help the organization focus? And lastly, where might I be avoiding advocacy to stay comfortable? Lots of questions, I know, but lots of really good reflection to be done. Because advocacy gives change a skeletal structure, right? It gives shape, and focus. Without good advocacy for what really matters, momentum can collapse because you don't necessarily see the results you need, the ones that leaders are paying attention to. And those leaders are the ones that make the decisions to continue working in continuous improvement. And without us advocating and making those connections from the strategy to the front line and the front line back up, we won't be here and we won't be in businesses. So go out and start advocating. Now, if this hit for you, if you're feeling stuck between leader initiatives and the problems you see on the front lines, and you're frustrated that you're not able to make that translation, I would encourage you to join Credible Heard Used. It's a 5-month program for CI leaders like you who are stuck and frustrated that you're not being heard and getting your ideas used. We begin the week of June 22nd, and there are still a couple of spots left. Check out the link in the show notes for more information to grab your spot. All right. See you next time when we get into the N in Change Shaper, navigate the business environment. See you there. That's a wrap for this episode of Thoughts on Change. If you're also out there trying to move culture instead of just installing tools, hit subscribe and share this with a fellow CI warrior. And remember, progress beats perfection, curiosity beats control, and culture beats everything. See you next time.